And now that I have your attention, we can dispense with the gong. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. There are, again, one more. Anybody with a seat next to them, raise your hand. There's two back in the back here. All right. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples is a welcoming congregation freely seeking intellectual and spiritual growth. We strive to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. Each of us is encouraged to grow spiritually in fellowship with others by joining in worship and celebration, education, reflection, and discussion. We strive to do all this, especially with our newcomers, in the spirit of love and acceptance. We invite you to join us after the service for refreshments and conversation beyond those glass doors and out onto the patio. I urge you to look at the Sunday news this morning for all the things that are going on within the congregation. It's buzzing lately. And we have three announcements this morning that I would invite people up to share. I'm going to start with Frank Kohatkar talking about progressive voices.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Reverend. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Our highly anticipated Progressive Voices Speak Out lecture series is just around the corner. The first lecture is February 4th, followed by 5 more every Wednesday evening thereafter. We have been presenting these lectures now for some 15 years. They have always been received with great deal of enthusiasm. The reason, or Monique may call it raison d'être, or purpose of this lecture series is, you may call also, this is our vision, is to project progressive thought leadership in Greater Naples community, and of course in our own congregation as well, on critical issues of the day. This year particularly, there are so many critical issues facing our nation, and for that matter, the entire world. And we don't know why, what we should do, what can be done. We believe the lecture series will enlighten us and help us better understand the world. Last year, almost 60% of our attendees for these lecture series were non-UUs, and we want to continue to attract them because their presence in our abode enhances our reputation as progressive thought leaders in the Greater Naples community. We, of course, want to attract more UUs this year as well. We pursue our mission by selecting the most critical issues of the day, and we want to address. Then we select scholarly speakers and experts who will address those issues. We want to stimulate and challenge intellectual curiosity of our audience so that we can better understand what is going on and why. Making financial gain is not really our purpose, but we are prudent and have always produced surplus for the congregation. You have copies of our flyer in your program, which will tell you we carefully selected the topics and credentials of speakers are all included in it. Here are the lecture topics. The first one, the global war against women and what can be done. And we have two wonderful, intelligent ladies who will be speaking on that. Our second topic is very much in the news nowadays, increasing extreme income inequality and its eventual consequences. Jim Kenney is our third speaker. Jim has been coming here for over 10 years. And many of you know him. Many of you know Jim quite well. He is really, I will call him a superstar. He's a brilliant scholar, and he is also a great speaker. He will be giving a lecture. He will be delivering a sermon here. He will be addressing a forum, and he will be conducting 2 workshops. Our fourth lecture is about climate change and its future for Florida. The next lecture is titled Rodney King, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Beyond, Race and Policing. That will be our fifth lecture. Our last lecture is Changing World Order and Challenges for the U.S. Foreign Policy. More details, including credentials of all speakers, are included in the flyer that you have. I hope you will be able to join us. Barbara Glasgow will be selling tickets outside after the service. Lectures start around 6:30 p.m. with wine or hors d'oeuvres reception and a good question and answer period where you will be able to connect with our speakers. We hope you will be able to attend. As a result, feel better informed and enriched in this otherwise bewildering world. Thank you.
Betsy Jajamis.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, I've seemed to have found a lot of hats to wear around this building lately. Today I'm wearing what I think is the most critical one right now, which is my stewardship team hat. As you UCGN members and friends, you will receive an invitation early this week to our second annual stewardship celebration following next Sunday's service. We're so excited, not only about this year's level of generosity so far, but the barbecue picnic is going to be a family fun fest of fellowship. So don't make any lunch plans next week other than being here under our big tent. As this week unfolds, the stewardship team has a challenge for you all. Please consider what your membership in our UU congregational family means to you. What impact has the renewed energy and excitement around living our mission made? To you, to your family, to the wider community. Does your pledge measure up to what a vibrant UUCGN means to you, or can you do more? In previous years, our cash flow was not so much a flow, but a trickle. Only basic and necessary items survived the budget process. There were few choices or options for ways to spend the incoming pledges, so we could only make do. The answer to the question, do we have any extra money to do? Fill in the blank. The answer was typically no. A massive amount of energy was spent figuring out how to first keep the lights on and then live our mission. Our shift towards stewardship increased awareness and generated real cash flow, which in turn created somewhat more freedom for the leadership, the committees, and the programs to choose how to live our mission. That freedom allows us to transition from just hoping for a fuller congregational life someday to living a more fulfilling UU community life now. We are spending less energy on the basic necessities of survival and focusing more time on mission-based programs. Committees are enthusiastic and focused. Ministry has taken on new dimensions. Activities are more integrated and varied. Community relationships are being forged, and we're able to give more. We're daring to plan for what it means to give robust life to our new mission as a united, generous UUCGN community. In doing so, we seek to have a measurable impact on the greater Southwest Florida community through programs, education, social justice events, generosity, and fellowship. Tony's sermon next Sunday will celebrate this reinvigorated generosity and incorporate some of your ideas that are being gathered from the 2020 Vision Task Force into his own sense of the possibilities this congregation, UUCGN, holds for the future. Thanks.
And speaking of 2020 Vision, Bob Bollinger will talk to us about that.
What dreams do you have for the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Greater Naples in the year 2020? Our congregation is in the fortunate position of being able to pick and choose. And this opportunity did not just happen. We have options because in years past, people acted boldly and wisely. Those who went before us obtained these 9 acres and made them available to a small congregation because they had a vision that that congregation would double and quadruple in size. Members visioned the design for a large facility, but built only the part of these buildings that we are using today and allowed for future growth. More recently, UUCGN had the vision to build Thomas Hall down at that end, and the religious education wing having the dream that if we build it, they will come. And they have. Now it is our turn to have some bold visions. Let me mention just 2 areas I've heard people talking about. One is, how do we assure that our buildings and our gardens are blended into the natural environment to create an attractive overall setting? In the year 2020, some people envision much of our 9 acres being left in its natural state. Some vision larger gardens, including edible gardens, and maybe a labyrinth. Some larger playgrounds or a jogging path. Some vision solar panels. Some vision a larger footprint of an expanded building with a larger sanctuary than this, with the necessary expanded parking lots. If we double the capacity of this room, then we must more than double the size of our parking lots. Consider another example. How can we foster dynamic progression of our leadership? Look at all the talented people we have here this morning. Most of you have ideas about how things should be done. Many of you have led initiatives in other churches, businesses, educational or government institutions. Yet when there is an opening to lead a committee or a new project, we worry we will not find that unique person we think we need. Or we cannot find someone to replace that saint who has chaired the XYZ committee for the last 20 years. In 2020, I envision having numbers of people who feel knowledgeable and confident and eager to fill positions as they open up, and who serve in those positions only as long as they have the energy and new ideas that make the challenges stimulating. That can happen, but it will take some creative thinking and wise choices to realize that 2020 vision. These are but 2 of many areas. Think of lifespan education and community involvement. Maybe we combine those and take our intellectual programs and mentoring skills out into the community, one among many visions people have. The 2020 Vision Task Force is collecting your ideas, and ideas being submitted by committees and smaller groups, and we're following this timeline. February 8th and 15th, we will conduct group feedback sessions in this room following the service. On March 1st, we will conduct the final workshop from noon till 3 p.m. Ken Hurto will be facilitating. On March 10th, the task force will recommend to the board next steps for advancing several visions. And on March 22nd, the congregation as a whole will decide how to proceed at the annual meeting. So we've had easels around in past weeks, and easels will be outside again today for the last time. So think beyond those little irritants that will always be devilish and paint a picture of a future UUCGN at its very best.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you all. So you have just experienced the vibrancy that's going on here at UUCGN. And you have also just passed the high point of the lengthy announcements in the congregation. Let's go right to singing. How about that? Number 347 is our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit. Please rise and bow to your spirit. Gather the Spirit, growing in all fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this life appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing of His soul. Nurtured in love and conscience refined, body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit, growing in all, drawn by the moon and led by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding on. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. As we join our separate fires to kindle one flame, so also do we merge our separate stories to create a common narrative. Our goal here is not to rest on past successes nor dwell too long on our failures, but to strive to be our best selves here and now and to create a shining vision for those who come after us. Please join me in the response, which is our UUCGN mission statement. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples So my story this morning is inspired by the beautiful fall feeling outside. Fall for me being New England. This is a story about when I was about 10 years old. And I was enjoying the fall weather, of course. And my grandfather, about 2 weeks before my birthday, said to me, "There just might be something big on your birthday." Well, I don't know about you, but when you think about something big, I'm thinking about a present sort of this high, that wide, with a big ribbon on it. And so, of course, I started to get excited. And I started bugging my grandfather every day. "Grampy, what is it? What are you going to give me?" And he wouldn't tell me. And I kept bugging him, and then after a while, he finally said, if you don't stop bothering me, it may not happen. In fact, he said, it may not happen at all. Well, that shut me up. So I had to wait these 2 weeks. I don't know why he talked about it 2 weeks in advance. But anyway, I had to wait 2 weeks, and the days dragged by. And finally, the day came, and it was a Wednesday, and I had to go to school, and I had to, watch the clock through the whole day, and it dragged on. And finally, the bell rang, and I ran home, and I got home, and my grandfather wasn't there. So I had to find something to do, so I went out to the driveway, and we had this gravel driveway. It wasn't paved, it was just gravel. And I went out there, and I probably moved every single stone in that driveway, and I made little paths along there, and I drew my name, and then I did that. Finally, my grandfather drove in his big old Impala. He unfolded himself out of the car. He was 6'2". And I went up to him, and he knew why I was there. And he looked at me, and he looked at the sky, and he took out his pocket watch. He had this watch that he had in his pocket that he looked at, just like this. And he put that back in his pocket, and he said, "All right, I'll be out in a while." So there I am in the driveway, moving the stones again. Finally, it's getting a little bit dusk. It means the sun's sort of really just about set, but not quite. And he walks out of the house, and he nods his head, and I follow him. And we go down into the backyard, and then up onto the railroad tracks that ran behind our house, and east along the tracks. And we walked probably 200 or 300 yards, and down the other side, and up a hill. And I'd never been there before. And up at the top of the hill was this flat stone, really flat stone. And I said, "Well, what's this?" Big stone, other stones around it, and my grandfather told me that it was an old well head, the top of the hill. And it had been covered, it had been capped, so people wouldn't, throw things in or fall in or whatever. And so I said, "Well, this is great." And I was sort of looking around for the big package, but of course there wasn't any big package. So I'm looking around, and I'm dropping stones into the little well where I could find a little hole. And he's telling me about the well, and then that he had a well like this on his property when he had a farm. And I didn't know he had a farm, and he caught my attention, but I was still moving around. And he told me about the farm and how he grew strawberries and asparagus, and he carted them into Boston for the markets. And about life on the farm, and my father was a young boy, and he had a calf and raised the calf. It was beautiful, and all things that I hadn't known before. He told me about how much he loved the soil, working in the soil, and that's why he loved pottery. He was a potter in his retirement. He had made beautiful vases and bowls and things. And I got this idea. It wasn't necessarily a satisfying idea, but it was an idea. And I asked my grandfather, "Grampy, is this my present? The stories?" And he said, "Maybe, but no. Why don't you sit down here on the edge of the stone and look that way?" and he was pointing east. And so I sit down and I sit with him, and we're looking out there, and all of a sudden, along the ridge line of the trees, there's this light started to show up. And the light sort of grew and grew and grew, and all of a sudden it was this huge moon that was rising up beyond the trees. The biggest moon I had ever seen, coming up through the trees and rising up. It was a harvest moon, he told me. And the farmers used to harvest their crops by the light of the moon. The sun was setting, the moon was rising, there was light a lot longer in the day, and they could even harvest by the light of the full moon. Well, my jaw was dropped already, and I would just watch this thing rise. And finally he nodded to me, and we went back as it was supper time. And in my house, for supper, you got to choose what you wanted for dinner. Birthdays weren't such a big deal, but so I had chosen lasagna, and we were headed back to home. We sat around the table, my parents and my grandparents, and whichever sisters were there, which I can't remember. And so somebody asked me while we were sitting there, well, what did Grampy give you for your birthday? He gave me the moon. And my grandfather leaned over and he said, and you'd better share it. And so that's what I just did. But I realized, too, as I grew older, that those stories, not just the moon, but those stories that he told me were really the gift. The gift of himself, the gift of sharing something important with me. That was the true gift. And that's what we're going to be talking about today in this service. So while you guys are off at your classes, talking about all sorts of other good stuff. So I'll let you go and we'll sing you out. Wolf, you want to stay? Okay. So now we have an opportunity to share with each other what's in our hearts, joys and sorrows that we carry with us each and every minute of each and every day. If you have something that you would like to share, I invite you to raise your hand. I will bring you the microphone, and I hope that you'll tell us your name and share briefly what's in your heart. For all those joys that have been spoken, for the sorrows that have been expressed, we keep those in our hearts and minds. And for all the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken, those too we carry with us. Let's sing together number 352, sitting in our seats, Find a Stillness. We'll sing just the first verse as we enter into a time of meditation and prayer. Spirit of life and love, we are grateful for this day and for the abundance we share as a community of faith. We find joy in the freedom to grow intellectually and spiritually within the company of fellow seekers, united by an understanding that there is no one claim to truth, and that we can learn from each other and be open to the possibility of change and transformation at any moment. Atheist, theist, and agnostic, Christian, Muslim, and Jew, Buddhist, Hindu, and pagan, scientist, poet, and mystic, all are found within our movement, all striving to embody a vision beyond belief, a vision of peace, of justice, of love. Passion burns within each heart. Curiosity stirs each mind. We write and rewrite our own narratives to make sense of the world, and then we come together to be challenged and recast the vision yet again. May it always be so. May we always find the courage to share of ourselves and find joy in the sharing of others, ever widening the circle of community. Let's take some time in silence as we think again those things that we carry with us in our hearts and minds, and of the joys that we bring as a community of faith. Responsive reading this morning is number 646 in your gray hymnals. The Larger Circle by Wendell Berry. Six, 4, 6. We clasp the hands of those that go before us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms. And the larger circle of all creatures. To a music so subtle and vast that no one hears it. The offering for the ongoing life and mission of this congregation will be gratefully accepted. This morning's reading is from Jalaluddin Rumi. A story is like water that you heat for your bath. It takes the message between the fire and your skin. It lets them meet, and it cleans you. Very few can sit down in the middle of the fire itself, like a salamander or Abraham. We need intermediaries. A feeling of fullness comes, but usually it takes bread to bring it. Beauty surrounds us, but usually we need to be walking in the garden to know it. The body itself is a screen to shield and partially reveal the light that's blazing inside your presence. Water, stories, the body, all things we do are mediums that hide and show what's hidden. Study them and enjoy this being washed with the secrets we sometimes know and then not. in the beginning. Before there were any beginnings or endings, there was no place that was not already God. An unimaginable openness suffused with divine light. This is the creation myth of the great 16th century Jewish mystic Rabbi Isaac Luria. Luria called this unimaginable openness Ein Sof, being without end, world without end. Ein Sof. Then there came an impulse to create something from nothing, but as I said, there was no place that was not already God. So Ein Sof withdrew to make space, like a father who withdraws, creating space so that a child can take their first steps. Rabbi Luria saw this withdrawing as the first step of creation, and he called it tzimtzum, contraction. Into the empty space, Ein Sof set bowls called kalim, great vessels which Ein Sof began to fill with divine light, like a mother who places bowls into which she will pour her most delicious soup. As the light poured forth, a perfect world was being created, a world with wonderful variety, a world of abundance, a world filled with compassion. But then something happened. The vessels shattered. No one has explained why they shattered, though of course there's been much speculation. Some say the bowls were too thin. Still others say that the divine emanations were too intense. Others say it's really not that hard to understand. Creation can be a messy business. No one makes perfect the first time. As the bowls shattered, divine sparks flew everywhere, some finding their way back to Ein Sof, some tumbling down through the void, trapped in the broken and scattered shards of the vessels, to become our world and us. To Rabbi Luria, this shattering, Shevirat HaKalim, was the second stage of creation. A fitting image of our world, broken, scattered, trapped in systems as small as an individual and as big as a global economy. Systems that somehow keep us from seeing, let alone reaching, for the possibility of a larger, more healthy whole. Even those living on some favorable section of shard only seem interested in keeping or bettering their situation. Like Rabbi Luria, there are modern-day mystics whose experience of the universe has expanded their awareness and focused their calling to urge us all to see the bigger picture. But their voices are often lost amid the cacophony of self-help gurus. And poets, like Wordsworth, have romanticized the individual mystical experience in nature. In lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey, Wordsworth wrote, "While with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things." But what if you see into the life of things and you don't like what you see? For me, this happened when it was least expected. The domestic air terminal, Terminal 4 that serves Manila, is a far cry from the shiny international terminal that welcomes travelers to the capital of the Philippines. More like an older bus station, Terminal 4 is crowded and noisy both inside and out. Not exactly the place I expected to have a life-shifting experience. I had come to Manila to visit a very trusted vendor with whom my company had been working for over 5 years, and after 4 days of working with the people in the plant and meetings, I was off to see a bit of the country. I arrived at the final checkpoint in the airport, ready to get to my gate early, when I was directed to a small booth and brought up short by a request for a 200 peso departure fee. To my chagrin, I had arrived at this point with no Philippine currency in my pocket. So my first question was, how much US? And my second question was, do you take credit cards? And when neither question was received with a favorable answer, my final question was, is there a bank machine in the terminal? And my spirits rose when this question was greeted with a brightening face, but the answer was still no. However, the woman said that there was a bank machine across the road from the terminal and down the street a little bit. Now, this story can follow two distinct paths at this point. I have often told with self-deprecating humor the story of my continued ineptitude in obtaining the necessary fee and of my unlikely rescue by the colorful Sergeant Nick Perez of the Manila Airport Police, who finally guided me to the ATM, all to procure the equivalent of about $4.50 in Philippine pesos. The story I have told less often is of the moment on this unexpected excursion when I was walking down the airport road and crossing over a waterway that ran close to the end of the nearby runway. Down below the level of the roadway, lining both sides of the channel as far as I could see, was a squatter's city, an amalgam of tin and wood and fabric, with men and women and children, edifices 1, 2, and sometimes 3 stories high. Like the great wonders of the world that you see in film or on television and are still caught by surprise when you visit them in person. The sight of this shattered world took my breath away. I had no time to stop, but for the briefest second, I don't know what I would have done if I had stopped. But in that moment, something shifted inside. I had looked down and seen into the life of things and been stunned by the reality. And at the end of the day, when I reached my very, very comfortable hotel room and sat at the end of my bed for a long time until the tears came. For who was I crying? For myself? Yes, to a degree. When our own stories are shaken, we lose a bit of ourselves and we grieve. Was I crying for the 2 million squatters in Manila and the billions around the world? Yes, partially. The combination of anger and impotence is a very frustrating thing. But I also began to understand that I was crying for people that I knew. People who, through some association, had become present in my mind. Folks back home, where I was volunteering, who I knew were struggling in silence, squatting within the seemingly healthy environment of our community. My favorite theologian, Henry Nelson Wyman, wrote about the power of this kind of association, and he called it qualitative meaning. He defined qualitative meaning as the sum of the connections we make between our immediate experience and the qualities of other past events that flood into our memory and our senses even as we are experiencing those new things. What you or I bring into any situation, our stories, our relationships, our experiences, they are all merged into something more, opening the possibility of a shift in our perspective or even a shift in the direction of our own narrative. Stories and myths and poetry and art all have the wonderful power to blend with our human experience and impact us deeply. When we share our experiences and our stories with others, they too build on that story, creating an ever-deepening awareness and appreciation of this new world and of each other. Wyman called this whole process the creative event, and he believed it could be our saving grace as a civilization. Of course, this takes action on our part, engaging, working, listening, reflecting, sharing, building on what comes out of our experiencing, widening the circle For Wyman, this was not the work of God. The work was God. What we need to do is invest ourselves, he said, in the creative event. The harsh realities of life for so many and the systemic nature of evil to which we all contribute demand our attention. It's only when we begin to work towards solutions, when we share our journeys, then the creative event can take hold and spur us on. For as long as we've existed as a species, there have been stories that tell of our hardships and our fears, our triumphs and our joys and all that run in between. We are, in fact, hardwired for story, thinking always in the narrative form, constantly reflecting, editing, rearranging, communicating, gauging reaction, re-editing, working to make meaning and build a personal story. Who am I? Why am I here? What do I care about? Stories are the medium that allow us to connect with each other, transcending generations, sharing not only daily life, but also the meaning and purpose that we make from it. Stories link us to ancient traditions, legends, archetypes, myths, and symbols, and great stories speak to the core of our existence, connecting us to something beyond the self, to universal truths. We need to share our stories and then open ourselves up to hearing the stories of others, whether we like them, understand them, know them, or not. In that creative moment, there is a shared power that can be contagious. We do need to find different ways of looking at things with eyes that see the staggering, unfiltered reality and can still look beyond to a different possibility, no matter how remote. This is why Rabbi Lurier's creation myth doesn't end in a heap of broken shards. And here I borrow a little from the version of the myth I once heard playwright and actress Naomi Newman tell. You see, the story is still unfolding. The perfect world is here, in and around us, but broken into jagged pieces like a puzzle thrown to the floor. The picture lost, each piece without meaning, until someone puts them back together again. We are that someone. There is no one else. We are the ones who can find the broken pieces, remember how they fit together, and rejoin them. And we call this repair of the world, Tikkun Olam, the third and final stage of creation. In every moment, with every act, we can heal our world and us. We are all holy sparks dulled by separation, but when we meet and talk and eat and make love and disagree with holiness in our eyes, seeing Ein Sof everywhere, our brokenness will end. Then our bowls will be strong enough to hold the light, and our light gentle enough to fill the bowls. As we repair the world together, we will see the wonderful variety. We will know true abundance. We will feel a world full of compassion. And we will learn that there is no place that is not God. May it be so. Let's sing together hymn number 140, Hail the Glorious Golden City. Rise in body or spirit. Share your stories and your ideas. Be bold in building a vision that matches the gifts of this congregation to the needs of the wider world, so that together we can continue to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. Please be seated for the postlude. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. Have a wonderful day.